Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, as someone who has some experience in doing shows where you say the date of the show and then you do it
Hmm.
on a different show,
Hmm.
that's kind of the whole gimmick with the morning show. We're getting into a little bit of a habit with the Michigan Monday show. Last week we did it on a Saturday. This week we did it on a Sunday. So if this continues trend, Tony, this trend, Michigan Monday might actually be on a Monday next week, maybe.
Maybe, perhaps, but welcome in everybody on a Sunday here. Yeah, um, we always do a Michigan Monday. We thought let's just open it up to everybody this week, and Michigan fans, Ohio State fans. We've seen fewer and fewer Michigan fans since the Texas game. We welcome all into these halls. But yes, wanted to talk about Michigan's 28-18 win over Arkansas State and the uninspiring nature of it. But it was good to see the running game get going again. I think the story of this game is we should probably just go ahead and start right there. Is Davis Warren getting benched for Alex Orji and what this means moving forward? Can you bench a guy and then go back to him, especially this coming week against USC? Like, is you now have to build your offense around Alex Orji, which is maybe what they should have been doing all along or were doing all along, but there wasn't enough there for that offense. So I think there are a ton of concerns right now for Michigan's offense, and it's not just the quarterbacks, but it is especially the quarterbacks.
It is especially the quarterbacks, and it feels like they started with Davis Warren this year because they went, well, Alex Orji can't throw the football
Mm-hmm.
accurately, and we can't rely on him to throw the ball. So while he would be great, and while you sort of got the sense all year that they were really hoping it would be Alex Orji because he would give them potentially a dual threat if he could do both of the threats, they felt pretty clearly before the season and just based on what they've shown you in terms of how they treat him when he's in the game, they do not trust him to throw the football very clearly. And they certainly don't trust him to throw the football more than about 5 yards downfield. So I think they put in Davis Warren and said, well, he can throw the football more than 5 yards down the field. And that is technically true. But when you watch him throw the football down the field, there are accuracy issues. There were some decision making issues on Saturday. Not one of his passes hit the ground, Tony. That's good news, right? Well, that's only good news if the opponents don't catch three of them. And Arkansas State caught three of them, and he doesn't give them the running threat that Orji does. And right now, putting Orji in as a starter feels like they are just kind of waving the white flag on having a passing attack this year. And when you look at the wide receivers and you look at the fact that Colston Loveland's injured and his status is a little bit up in the air right now,
Mm-hmm.
you can understand why they might want to say, well, we know this isn't working, so now we're going to try something different.
Yeah, and we're going to be all over the board on this one. The Colston Loveland thing gets injured in the first half, like a shoulder or something, then comes out of halftime and he's back in the game. And he catches one pass and goes to the ground. He's like, "No, take me out. I can't do this anymore." Like he was clearly hurt in the first half. Tried to go again, landed on it again. Is like, "No, I can't do it." So it'll be interesting. It didn't. Way too early to say, and I don't know what has been coming out from the Michigan side of things to this point, but I mean, he's not going to be 100% for USC. He might not be any percent for USC. And if they don't have him, their passing game is then you just turn to Marlon Klein, the other tight end, basically, and hope that you can bust somebody deep. But as we saw in this one, Alex Orji had somebody wide open in the fourth quarter, overthrew it. He completed 2 of 4 passes for 12 yards. One completion was to the line of scrimmage. Another one was like 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage. So these are just very, very short passes. And then Davis Warren, I don't even know how much we need to spend talking about him because it seems like they're going to move on. But I don't know if they can yet because they don't. If they're going to throw the ball, how do you go away from Davis Warren entirely unless Jack Tuttle is ready? But there's no word on his situation in terms of being healthy. It doesn't seem like they have any interest in going to Jaden Denegal or Jaden Davis. Like those guys aren't in the picture at all. So you're still stuck with the same problem you have. But it's not like you can trust Davis Warren to throw the ball when his 3 interceptions, none of them were good. And maybe he got hit on one of them. but the other two, like, he's going to continue to get hit because of this offensive line. So this is just a situation that is not conducive to getting into any kind of shootout this coming week against USC, or conducive to being in a close game on the road at Illinois or Indiana when one turnover can lose you the game. At this point, do you just have to go with Alex Orji and the running game and then the surprise attack of the passing game? Because I think that might be their best way forward. It's not a good way forward. They don't have a good way forward, so you have to find your best way forward. And I think maybe just keeping the ball out of the air is the best way to go for this offense right now.
Yeah, and we have a super chat from Ryan Dawes that we got to get to in a second, but it does feel like the best path forward. There are no great paths forward. There's not a great option for Michigan right now in terms of running the offense, because the offensive line is shaky enough that they're not able to consistently run the ball against good defenses. And there's really not a viable passing option on this team right now. And the wide receiver talent isn't very good. And the tight end, Colston Loveland, who's really their only consistent threat in the passing game, is hurt. And I will read you Sherrone Moore's post-game quote, and you can parse it to your heart's content. He said, quote, "We'll see. That's why we've got a doctor. So we'll see what the doctor said. I think Colston left, and then Miles Hinton just cramped up, and then the same thing with Rayshon Benny. We'll see what the doctor says after further eval. So go ahead and take that to whatever you'd like it to mean, because there was not a lot of content there. It did not seem super optimistic about Colston Loveland. And if he misses the Michigan USC game, that's going to be, I think, a big problem for them. It feels like the offense at this point has to be, you're going to run the ball, you're going to try and do as much with the +1 in the running game that is Alex Orji can give you, and then occasionally mix in a trick play, aka a forward pass. And that's going to have to be, you're going to have to just they may just treat the forward pass from Alex Orji kind of like a halfback option pass, where it's just, well, you may every once in a while just have to mix something in, and just to keep the defense off balance with, Penn State. We talked about this on the episode of the morning show that's going to drop a little later on today. Penn State has kind of taken a similar approach where they don't really throw to the wide receivers all that much, and they're not throwing the ball really at all. It's really just sort of lean on the running backs to make big plays. And Khalil Mullings has been really, really good this year. He's been a big, big positive for them. Donovan Edwards continues to be Donovan Edwards. He continues to be, why is this guy on the cover of the video game again? And has not really provided any kind of an answer to that. But yeah, there really are not any great answers right now for the Michigan offense, just because between the offensive line not being up to the usual Michigan standard, and the quarterback play not being up to the usual Michigan standard, and the wide receiver play not being up to the usual Michigan standard, there just are not that many great options right now. Super chat from Ryan Dawes. He says, Michigan has only Michigan to blame. The whole Michigan man thing is like the episode of South Park and the Prius owners. Tony, I am not familiar with the episode of South Park and the Prius owners. Are you familiar with it?
I think, is it just this moral superiority, this air of superiority, because you're doing something that is good for the environment and you're better for it. You're better than the people who aren't. And the Michigan man thing, is it's been around forever, whether the team is good or whether the team is bad. I think the Michigan is to blame here, because how do you end up with this level of playmaker on your offense? And we'll talk about the defense in a bit, but when you look at these wide receivers, and this is something I'll be writing about in Michigan Monday, because it continues to be an issue. So far this season, Tom, the Michigan wide receivers have been targeted 40 times for a grand total of 188 yards. That's 4.7 yards per target. 40 times for 188 yards. The Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins have combined for 40 carries for 294 yards. Like, those two guys are averaging 7.4 yards a target, essentially. And Michigan's wide receivers, they're outside guys, they're inside guys, they're playmaking, pass catching wide receivers are averaging 4.7 yards per target. And it's just completely unacceptable. But also, and it's not, the receivers and the quarterbacks are to blame, because they're both very, very average. And so it's not like, oh, they're just being held back by the receiver, by the quarterback. No, and it's not like the quarterback is being held back by the receivers. They hold themselves back and then hold each other back. And you see, this is the product that you get. They've started 5 different receivers this year because they're still trying to figure something out. Like, let's throw this guy in. Let's throw this former walk on. Let's throw this guy in. It's let's throw in Ronnie Bell's brother. He's got to be good, right? I mean, I think he has 2 catches for not much now. And so I think you just, if you stick with Orji, you got to get back to doing what Michigan has done forever, which is, the play action bootleg stuff. And then it's just a simple dump pass to a tight end and something like that. Or you got some simple routes for these simple screens for these receivers, because once you start getting more than 5, 6, 7 yards downfield, there's basically good luck catching those passes. So I've also got like all of these different catch numbers of their 21 catches for the wide receivers for 188 yards. Basically, 9.5 yards per reception, which is terrible for a wide receiver. And 7 of their 21 catches have gone for more than 10 yards. And that's, a third have actually gone beyond their average. The numbers are really, really gross and unproductive. And where's the hope? Where's like, oh, well, if just this one thing happens, or if this one weird trick happens, Tom, like, how do you make this into a not just a balanced attack, but something that defenses have to fear?
And that's, I think, the concern, where if you had a great wide receiver core and just an okay quarterback, you can make that work. And sometimes the wide receivers can just make the quarterback look good. And if you have a great quarterback and just an okay wide receiver core, sometimes the quarterback can throw your guy open, hit the ball fit the ball into a tight window, throw it in a spot where only the wide receiver can get it. The problem is Michigan's 0 for 2 there. They don't have the great quarterback. They don't have the great wide receivers. And the testimony to that is Colston Loveland goes out. He had 3 catches for 30 yards on Saturday against Arkansas State. He goes out. Okay, so who's the leading receiver on the day that Colston Loveland goes out? Well, it's Marlon Klein, another tight end. 3 catches, 43 yards. He had a 33-yarder right before the half, and then that was it. He was targeted 3 times, 3 catches. That's great. Like that's wonderful. But the wide receiver talent just isn't there. Their leading wide receiver in the game was Frederick Moore, 3 catches. All 3 went for first downs. That was good. 3 catches, 38 yards. That's good. A little bit of a possession receiver. He's actually out of the same high school in St. Louis as Jamison Williams was, but he is not a Jamison Williams type receiver. He was something like the 50th or 60th receiver in his recruiting class. He's fine, but he's not going to be someone who turns into a game breaker anytime soon. And there's just the talent really isn't there. You see guys like Samaj Morgan, and what is Samaj Morgan? Is he like the poor man Steve Preston, where you see him in the return game, you're like, oh, like there might be something there, but it doesn't necessarily translate to the wide receiver position the way you would have thought. He had one where I think he had, what did he finish with? 0 yards. I apologize for the error. 2 catches, 3 yards. So he was targeted 3 times and averaged 1 yard per target, long of 5. And the one that he did not catch was an interception where Davis Warren airmailed him. He was covered pretty tightly, and Warren overthrew the tight coverage and threw it directly to a safety. So that is something where that's not necessarily going to get better. I don't see the route to that getting better unless Jack Tuttle is secretly and suddenly amazing out of nowhere. I don't know where this gets meaningfully better for them. And you can do the one phase offense, like it's just going to be running the ball and throwing the ball as a trick play. You can get away with that against certain teams. They have teams on their schedule, including the one this weekend, where I don't think that's going to work real well.
Now, here's an interesting stat for you. So all of these receivers have produced just 3 catches of 20 yards or more, and only one of 30, and that was the 31-yard touchdown on towards the end of that Texas game, towards the end of one of those games. But so they've got 3 pass plays of 20 yards or more. Giles Jackson, Washington wide receiver, former Michigan Wolverine, has 6 such receptions this season. He has 24 catches on the season for 326 yards. I'm guessing they could use him at this point. Now he would just be add to all of their. I think they're all just slot receivers at Michigan right now. Frankly, they're just there's no physicality with any of the receivers. I know they're trying to do more with like Amari and Walker, and they had him out there, but he transferred out. He came back. He was supposed to play defense. Like, no, we kind of need you on offense. There's who do you throw to in this receiving core on third down? The answer is you don't. You look for the tight ends or you scramble. And so, that's what the passing game is. I will say it is interesting to me with the running game, and they ran the ball for crazy yards, 301 yards on 44 attempts. This was the best I've seen Donovan Edwards look. And then you look at the numbers overall, and 17 carries for 82 yards, 4.8 yard average, long of 9. Now, I think he had like 3 or 4 9-yard carries, but this is as quick, as jittery, as powerful as he's looked. And still, after 4 quarters, and he only played the first 3, it's still just 4.8 yards per carry. And it's crazy that, it's, the water continues to find its level with Donovan Edwards. Even when he looks pretty good, it's still like, well, it's not all good, clearly.
Well, and you expect him to also have an impact in the pass game, and he had 1 catch for 11 yards, 17 yards after catch, which tells you where he caught the ball, but he was only targeted once. That he feels like on third down, where should you go with the ball? I think he's pretty high on that list if Colston Loveland's not out there, but they're not really looking for him in the pass game, or at least they weren't on Saturday. I agree with you. I had the same thought watching it. Wow, he really looks good. And then I looked at the post-game stats. It was like, oh, really? Khalil Mullings is very clearly the best running back on this team. I don't think it's really even worth a particularly detailed conversation. He runs harder. He breaks more tackles. He hits the hole more authoritatively. He doesn't dance. He is clearly, to me, the best running back on the team. And I think he could be the Hassan Haskins type, maybe the Blake Corum type for this year's team. Donovan Edwards is just sort of, he's a complimentary back. And even when he has a good game like that, it's just kind of fine. He kept the chains moving. He kept them ahead of the sticks. He kept them on schedule. It felt like there were a lot of 2nd and 3s because he had a 7-yard run. He was consistent, which is the one thing that he is almost never. He's almost never consistent, and he was consistent on Saturday. Again, it was against Arkansas State, but he was consistent, which is like good. That's what you would want to see out of him, but he wasn't explosive. So you feels like you get one or the other with him. Sometimes neither, rarely both. So Saturday it was consistent, and that's good. There were a couple of people on in the chat wondering about, I think, the final score of the game. If you did not watch this game, yes, it was 28-18. Arkansas State was down 28-3 with about 6 minutes left in the game. And we can get into some of the Arkansas State decision-making that kept it from being a lot closer than 28-3 for much of the game. But they scored with about 5 minutes left, and they scored with like 8 seconds left and then went for 2. So, this was not a game where Michigan was in any real danger at any point in the second half. But also they didn't look great in really any phase of the game at any point. They looked okay on defense for most of the game. They looked decent on offense at times, but it was really it was very uninspiring throughout.
Yeah, very much so. And there are just some, you mentioned some decision making, like they had 4th and 1 from the 20 something on their first drive. Arkansas State did, and they chose to kick rather than go for it when they had the momentum and they were moving the ball. They of course missed that field goal. They doinked another field goal. They threw an interception to Makari Page in the end zone. So that's 3 scoring opportunities in what eventually became a 10-point game. So you don't have to play this game 100 times to get one Arkansas State win, frankly. Like this is, and I had people on Twitter saying, yeah, but Michigan let off the gas in that 4th quarter in the second half. I'm like, how How much gas were they giving it in the first 3 quarters? And well, they had bench players, and they always have bench players, and they rotate guys on defense a lot. And it's not like they can just, they're not to the point time where they can be like, you know what, let's just coast the rest of the way. We've got everything figured out. We can do this. They can't play that way. And certainly they're not playing that way on offense. Now, Donovan Edwards didn't play in the fourth quarter, but your best running back did. So, I mean, they're not just mailing it in 28-3. Everything should be fine. And it was, they were never going to lose this game, but they could lose a different game playing this same way, especially turning the ball over and doing what they do, and lack of giving up some big third down plays in this one early on. So this is they were not going to lose this game, Tom, but if they play like this against Big Ten teams, you might see a loss that you don't expect.
Yeah, Arkansas State is not a good team. This is not the Arkansas State from 10 years ago where they were churning out P5 coaches every other year. This is a bad Arkansas State team. I think they were 94th or 91st in SP Plus coming into the week. Had someone in the chat with, Odysseus says hard to gauge the running game when Arkansas State was rated 114th against the run going into Saturday. This is a bad Arkansas State team that was not, they didn't have the explosive players to potentially challenge Michigan and, put up some quick points on offense. They did not stand up well. They don't stand up well in the running game. So that really fits what Michigan wants to do well. And you still didn't see Michigan running for 400 yards and 45 points or any of that kind of stuff. We can run through Michigan's schedule later and do the how many games are you bet your life sure that they're going to win this year? Because that list is not very long for me. I think the more interesting question right now, though, is when the opponent scores fill in the blank points, Michigan is in trouble, completely free of context, regardless of who they're playing. How many points do you see on the other side of the scoreboard and go, oh boy, that's probably very bad news for Michigan. I don't think they can consistently put up that number, because I know it doesn't, I know it starts with a 3 at the most. It might start with a 2 for me this year. And that only gives you a very narrow pathway to win football games, because you have one bad turnover that gives you a touchdown, or you have one bad play on special teams that gives you a touchdown. You are on your way to 20-something points pretty quickly.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you just set the number at, say, 24 points, that it's going to make it a 4-quarter game, and one drive can get it done. I mean, you look at Fresno State, that was a Michigan won 30-10. They win this one 28-18. It doesn't take much for this to be a last drive type of game where you either win it or lose it. And before we get to the super chat, the rushing, I'm not saying the running game is fixed at all. This was just good to see for them, because they averaged 4.4 yards per carry against Fresno State. So to do 6.8 in this game is it's what they should do. So just seeing them do something they should do is good for them, but I don't expect that to continue. Like they will need Donovan Edwards to have a 60-yarder here and there for Michigan to average 6.8 yards per carry in a game in the Big Ten, I believe, or Kalel Mullins.
Yeah, one of those guys. You need those guys to break off a big play, because if you're constantly relying on pounding the ball on the ground and picking up 5 yards a carry, you can't have too many incomplete passes, and I don't think the passing attack is particularly accurate with any of them. The Davis Warren passes were generally, they had a guy running wide open and he hit him. There was one where Colston Loveland was running like a little slant or something, and Davis Warren put it on his back hip. And if he'd put it where he should have put it, Colston Loveland might still be running, but the accuracy is just not there. And Alex Orji's thrown 2 touchdowns, and both of them were basically thrown to the line of scrimmage, and neither one was a good throw. This week it was to a true freshman tight end, Hogan Hansen, and the ball went 8 yards in the air and it was low. He had to reach down to like his thighs to catch the ball, and he was running wide open because they just kind of ran him back across the field kind of against the action. So he just kind of got lost in the wash, and it was an easy throw, an easy touchdown, and it still was not a very accurate throw. So they're going to have to be able to run the ball consistently, because they absolutely cannot throw the ball consistently. And the pass pro, some of the line issues, the pass pro is not great. The offensive line in the run blocking has not been super consistent this year. If you can't be consistent in the run game and your passing game's not consistent, a sack is basically congratulations, you warm the punter up, because if you're behind the sticks, you're completely screwed if you can't throw the ball and you can't run the ball consistently. So that I think is a concern, would be a major, major concern to me. Here's a super chat from Ryan Dawes. Hypothetical matchup: Colorado versus Michigan. Who wins? This is kind of gross. I will take a moment to remind everyone of the Cordell Stewart, Michael Westbrook play, one of the iconic moments of 1990s college football in a Colorado Michigan game. But boy, I think my lean here would be Michigan, just because I think you're going to be able to put Will Johnson on Travis Hunter, and that might limit what Travis Hunter can do. And Colorado is kind of similar to Michigan, where it's like, well, they've got some good pieces here and there, but overall they have a lot of the same problems with 1 to 22. The talent drops off a cliff at some point. And I think Will Johnson might be able to maybe negate Travis Hunter on offense to a certain degree. Travis Hunter on defense, if you're not throwing the ball to your wide receivers, Travis Hunter on defense isn't nearly as much of a threat. So, and I don't know that, I think the Michigan defense is probably good enough to not let Shedeur Sanders run for 200 yards or whatever on them. So I'm going to say Michigan, but the score better be in the 20s or I'm going to be wrong.
Well, we'll find out. I just threw Michigan at Colorado on behind me on the EA Sports with 5-minute quarters. It is at Colorado. It is a night game, so everything is pitting everything against Michigan there. But we'll find out. Tom, you say throw Will Johnson on Travis Howard. Will Johnson did not have a good game, and he's been giving up some catches of late. So he needs to step it up as well. But I'm not convinced that Colorado can stop much of anybody. So I would probably go Michigan. You know what? Where's the game? That's who I'm taking. I'm going to go ahead and take the home team in this one. But neither team is consistent enough to be confident. I will say, I think Colorado, if they could protect Shedeur Sanders, they can throw the ball all over the place, and Michigan does not have the secondary for that right now. They would just get spread out, and as Texas showed, we don't even have to throw to Will Johnson's side. We can, and Colorado has 3 other guys that they can throw to if they don't want to throw to Travis Hunter. They can move the ball. And what does Wink Martindale do in response? How out of position are his guys? What kind of blitzing is he doing? That's a more interesting matchup than the one that I had in my head that I forgot to put on, and that was Michigan versus Florida State. Tom.
Oh boy. Well, we've seen Michigan win this season. We have not seen Florida State win this season. Although I think Florida State's probably played 2 teams better than anyone Michigan has beaten this year. So Florida State, I'm pretty sure, beats Arkansas State. So yeah, maybe that's a little closer than you might think. It is. Here's an interesting one for Mike Schaefer. Toledo versus Michigan. Who wins?
How about them Rockets? I mean, we've seen them, 2008, Toledo went in there into Ann Arbor and won, and then still not good enough to keep Tom Amstutz from getting fired after the season. That is very interesting because there are some throwbacks to the 2008 season. As I'm watching this Michigan offense, it's like, which one of these quarterbacks is Nick Sheridan and which of these quarterbacks is Stephen Threet? Because that's really what you've got going on. And honestly, they may have been more. Would you say they're more equipped in 2008 at quarterback than they are right now? Because both of those guys were capable of throwing the ball. Neither one of them were good at it, but they would throw with both. Nick Sheridan could run around a little bit. Stephen Threet was a bigger guy. I think maybe they had Jeremy Gallon at that point, and maybe he was only a true freshman at that point. But they didn't have great weapon. Was Mario Manningham a senior or junior? Regardless,
I think he was gone after 07. But I think the funny thing is if you could build a time machine, right now I think Michigan fans, if they could build a time machine, the task list is in some order: kill Hitler, take Alex Orji back to 2008, bring Stephen Threet back to 2024. That's probably not a bad trade for either of those teams. I don't think it turns either of them into Big Ten champions, but it might win them an extra game or two for sure. Alex Orji would be probably a great Rich Rod quarterback, just because Rich Rod didn't, Pat White was not exactly Dan
Mhm.
Marino, and he was still pretty effective in that West Virginia offense. I think you could take an Alex Orji and turn him into a pretty good Rich Rod quarterback back in the day. But the 2008 offense, you had the excuse of, well, this is quite a dramatic
Mhm.
transition from what Lloyd Carr wanted to do to what Rich Rod wanted to do. You kind of had the Paul Johnson transition where you're going in and out of a Paul Johnson offense, and oh
Mhm.
boy, that's a very different thing. So you're going to have that transition year. This is the same guy who was running the offense last year. There is one button, it still reads smash, and that's the offense. And so this is just an absolute lack of talent. Like, the talent just fell off a cliff after last year on the offensive side of the ball, and they're wasting what is a pretty talented Michigan defense. I don't know the next time Michigan's going to have multiple first round draft picks on defense. They're going to next year, and it feels like they are just going to completely go to waste this year. So that's I think that would be a pretty big concern to me if I was a Michigan fan right now.
I do wonder what the line on that would be, Toledo at Michigan.
Boy, you look at what Toledo did against uh, Mississippi State last night. What did they get? 41 points, right? 40 something? Wasn't it 41-24 or something like that? I mean,
41-17.
41-17. Yeah. I think Toledo just has to get to 30 and they win that game.
Hmm.
And I think Toledo could win. I'm sure Toledo would be an underdog right now, but
Mhm.
and it's week 3, and we'll see what Michigan
Mhm.
looks like in a month. But right now, based on what we saw against Arkansas State, and again, we recognize the game was 28-3 with 6 minutes left. We're not saying that was really a 10-point win, but oh boy, based on what you saw them do against Arkansas State, I think I would at least take a look at that Toledo money line if that was made available to me in a hypothetical matchup. Do we want to hit? But do we want to hit the? Want to
Yeah,
hit
it's
the
be
defense
yeah,
before we move on to my angry rants about Arkansas State's game management?
so Arkansas State moved the ball here and there, but Michigan again has shut down the running game, held Arkansas State to 58 yards, and that's just something they continue to do. They other than Texas, and Texas didn't have an easy time against Michigan. I do. I'm still expecting to see more from Mason Graham and see anything from Kenneth Grant at this point. I haven't really seen much from him. Have not seen anything really from Jayshon Barham at linebacker yet either, and the defensive ends have been quiet. We continue to see Jair Hill get attacked at corner, and as I said, Will Johnson probably gave up 4 or 5 catches in this game. And as a corner, you're not going to shut everybody out. You may shut out some teams, but their quarterback had no concerns about throwing at him, and that was pretty interesting to me that they just continued to go at him. It wasn't always successful, but it did show some cojones on their part. But overall, like the this is not an I don't not impressive, but this is not a dominating defense at this point. But also, it was 28-3, and so yeah, you might ease back on it. I was just only 3 tackles for loss in this game. I think is a little surprising, and I'm still waiting for Mason Graham to dominate a game, and he has not done that yet.
No, he's been fine, but not you notice him, but you don't. He doesn't completely take over games, and that's not the easiest thing in the world to do from an interior defensive line spot, especially when other teams can sort of game plan around
Mhm.
you. I always think of Dan Wilkinson and watching teams just run away from Dan Wilkinson, and it was you can do that, and it's okay. And the rest of the Michigan defense it picked up the slack for the most part against Arkansas State. They only allowed 2.3 yards per rush and 4.1 yards per play. So, and that was not skewed by a bunch of 12-yard losses, 15-yard losses. It just they were not able to consistently move the ball. Arkansas State was not. They had. I'm going to pull up their drive chart real quickly here. 13 plays, 51 yards to open the game. And I always sort of take the opening drive and set that aside because you can set things up, and you have your script and you're sort of testing things out and you're mixing things up. And so the first drive, a lot of times, is a little bit of an outlier. We'll get to the end of that drive again in a little bit. But 3 plays, 0 yards, 4 plays, 6 yards, 3 plays, -3 yards, 3 plays, 5 yards, 10 plays, 58 yards, 7 plays, 25 yards, 6 plays, 16 yards, 3 plays, 7 yards. So really one drive that went longer than 7 plays or 25 yards between the 2:23 mark of the first quarter and the 10-minute mark of the fourth quarter. So really they didn't do a whole heck of a lot other than that one drive right at the end of the first half. And that was a drive where Michigan was probably playing a little bit softer because it was right before the half and it was just keep the ball in front of you. You can give up a first down, don't give up a touchdown kind of thing, just because of the game state right there. So Michigan controlled the Arkansas State offense for most of the game until you kind of got into garbage time in the last couple minutes in that first drive. But it was still they were fine, but they weren't dominant. This was not Ohio State holding Western Michigan to 99 yards of total offense. That's a Western Michigan team that's probably better than Arkansas State. They threw for 222 yards. They rushed for 58 yards. They were, and Michigan was sloppy, 7 penalties, 69 yards. It was just it was a really it was fine. It was okay, but there was a lot you could look at and go, yeah, that's a little bit of a concern. And it feels like you can throw at everyone outside of Will Johnson without any real concern. I don't want to go out on a limb here, Tony. I'm going to say that Ohio State's skill talent is probably better than Arkansas State's. And Arkansas State really seemed to have no real concern about going after anyone except for Will Johnson. And even at times, as you said, Will Johnson himself.
Well, and before we get to the super chat, 6 drives for Arkansas State ended inside the Michigan 25, and they got 3 scores out of those 6 drives. Not that all of these drives are long, because some of them come from turnovers, but like the 3 drives, 3 scoring opportunities went empty in a what ends up being a 10-point game is alarming. And just in that way, if I just say those words, that's alarming. Super chat.
That is alarming, and we'll get to that again in a minute. GOJ just says, "Salute, fellas. Thank you. Appreciate you. Appreciate you hopping on here on a Sunday afternoon. Figured people would probably be tired of watching NFL by now. I haven't even looked at the Brown score. I'm just going to assume that I'm probably right. So yeah, it was, as far as the missed opportunities for Arkansas State. I mentioned the 2 drives they had. They had 2 drives in the first 3 quarters where they had any kind of extended drive. One was 13 plays for 51 yards. Guess what they tried to do, Tony? 4th and 1. They drive down to the Michigan 24. What do? They try and kick a field goal on 4th and 1. They doink it. Why on earth? How many times are you going to be that close to the Michigan red zone? It's 4th and 1. Why are you trying to kick a field goal there? You're not going to win the game 3-0. Go 4th and 1. Try and pick up your first down. Try and keep the drive going. Give yourself an opportunity to score a touchdown. They get 0 points, not even 3 points on that drive. And then right before the half, another field goal attempt, another doink. It's just brutal. How do you that one I understood. It's right before the half. Okay, you got to get down there. But you left points on the field there. They had another one where they were down in Michigan territory. They were at the Michigan 20. This is late in the third quarter. Quarterback throws the ball into the end zone, and it was 2 Michigan defensive backs. Makari Page ended up coming down with the ball, but there were 2 Michigan defensive backs, both in position for what the announcer called one of the easiest interceptions you'll ever see. It was 2 guys who basically ran the route for the wide receiver. The wide receiver stopped 5 yards short of where the ball landed, and Makari Page intercepts it in the end zone. You could very easily, again, it was 28-3. We get it. It's, we're not saying add 10 points and Arkansas State wins. We're not saying that. But the argument that, oh, well, it was 28-3 is like, well, boy, it could have very easily, you convert one of those drives into a touchdown. You don't doink 2 field goals. All of a sudden, then it is 28-16. And it's not like Michigan did something incredible to get them to doink 2 field goals. They just doinked 2 field goals. And you think about how far does the ball have to go to the left or the right to be in if you hit the upright. You hit the upright twice. You're pretty close. It's this is a 28-18 game that was simultaneously not nearly as close as the score indicated, but also could very well have been just as close as the score indicated.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a 42-3, 40. It's like on one hand, it's clearly a blowout, and then on the other hand, it's like there are several things that happened, and that the interception from the 20 into the end zone. That dude is trying to throw interceptions that entire drive toward down inside Michigan territory. Like he was getting away with some, but the opportunities that Michigan provided to Arkansas State it's dangerous territory, because you're going to run into teams that are better able to handle being given those things. And as I said at the outset, when somebody told me that, well, Michigan just took their foot off the gas. If Michigan wants to put their foot back on the gas, this offense right now is like a Geo Metro going uphill, and there's no acceleration. You can just only go at the speed you're currently going. So put your foot on the gas all you want. You're just going to go at the speed you're already going. You're just going to continue forward. You're not going to pick up the pace, because there is no gas right now for this offense. And no offense to the Geo Metro owners out there, I'm just from experience, it doesn't move like that, and this Michigan offense doesn't move like that either.
There's a little bit of an Adobe, the sassy Mexican import from the Saturday Night Live commercials. It's like, yeah, they're still molding it. It's like, okay, yes, and if someone runs into your bumper, yes, you can mold it. It is the little car that's made out of clay. But yeah, there is not a lot of, what is it, a V2? Is it a V1 under the hood, Tony? I'm not a big car guy. I don't know, but it just we talked about on the episode of the morning show that's going to be going up. We talked about the Oregon offense finally getting out of second gear. I don't think the Michigan offense has even. I think Michigan's been stuck in first for a lot of this season, and they'll pop a big one. And it's been a lot of Khalil Mullings for the most part popping big plays. But outside of that, it's like, oh boy, what else is there? And it's fine. Like they've won their games so far, except for the one that they didn't, and that's a lot of teams are going to lose to Texas, and that's okay. I asked you beforehand, go through the Michigan schedule, and you tell me which of these games is I would bet my life that Michigan wins this game. That there are plenty of Ohio State games where I would, hey, they're going to play Northwestern. That is a bet your life kind of game. Yeah, they're going to play Purdue. That is a bet your life kind of game. Run through this Michigan schedule with me, and you tell me which ones are definite losses, maybes, and bet your life they're going to win. Okay, USC this weekend.
I've got that as a loss for Michigan.
Minnesota at home.
Michigan is going to win that. I'm not betting my life on it. I'll bet Kevin's, but I feel decent about Michigan's chances. But also, I could see a loss, because we've seen with this team, we've seen the problems. But I would say a win.
That's one of those games where Ryan Day has talked a bunch this year with the Ohio State team about leave no doubt, and that they don't want this to be within the margin of the one stupid play or the bad call or the whatever. You just want to put the game out of reach. I don't know that I feel that the Michigan offense can completely put a game out of reach against Minnesota, and that's a concern. Next up, at Washington, and I will remind you, the Washington Huskies did just lose to Washington State.
Yeah, I think going on the road, that's going to be a big game for Washington. So I won't be surprised to see Michigan lose that. They should win it, but I'm not betting on it. I'm not betting anybody's life on that one.
Yeah, that feels like a win, but it's a 60-40 maybe to me, something like that. At Illinois,
I'm taking Illinois on this one. They have worse Illinois teams have put up a fight against better Michigan teams, and we saw that just a year or two ago. So Illinois plays defense. They have some skill, some playmaking. It's at Illinois. I have Illinois in this one, which about a week ago I started feeling this way. So that's where I am.
I'm gonna have I'm gonna have Michigan here. I don't feel great about it. I'm not a big believer in Illinois. I think that win over Kansas was a little fluky and probably has them a little overvalued now. But the other thing is it's at Illinois, and what's the scariest part of Illinois playing at Illinois, Tony?
The weather.
Yes, the wind. The wind is the correct answer. Yes, and now we'll do the guy tapping his head gif. Wind can't mess with your passing game if you don't have a passing game, Tony. Just think about it.
Oh,
I'm just saying,
interesting.
think about it.
Hmm.
Four-dimensional chess, as long as none of the dimensions are involved throwing the football. Michigan State Spartans, Tony. Is Michigan going to win the extremely ugly Paul Bunyan Trophy this year?
I'm going to take the home team, but this Sparty is going to throw everything at Michigan in this one, and they have skill to make this one interesting. This is another one. If you give Michigan State 24 points, how great do you feel about it?
I think I've got Michigan here as
So do
well.
I, but
But yeah. I got Michigan here. I'm not a big believer in Michigan State. I think you're going to find out a lot about Michigan State, and they just played Prairie View and won 40-0. Prairie View is extraordinarily bad, so I think they're probably not going to be very good. And this late in the season, someone's going to get hurt. This is not a team that has the depth to make up for it.
mm,
So I'm going to say Michigan, especially because it's in Ann Arbor. But again, I don't think that's a bet your life game. Or the Oregon Ducks coming to Ann Arbor. Tony, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to preempt you and just say I don't think Michigan wins this football game.
next.
Next, all right. Next, all right. Uh, Here's another one that's a little spicier than
Mhm.
maybe the beginning of the season. At Indiana.
Well, and the thing is, this is coming right on the heels of the Oregon game. So, what kind of situation physically, mentally is Michigan going to be in if that Oregon game goes as poorly as we think it could? And then also, this is going to be, I assume this is going to be the biggest game in Memorial Stadium this year. So there's going to be, I would assume, plenty of talk from Kurt Signetti all week long, or does he go low key because he knows he's got something, as opposed to being blustery and boisterous because he knows he doesn't. Like he's a very confident guy. But this one, the way Indiana is playing right now, and we talked about it on the morning show for tomorrow that you guys can check out. The Indiana's schedule sets up pretty good this year. Like they could do some things in this one. I think they could definitely win this one, but we also have a history of Indiana in games that they could beat Michigan in, ultimately losing them, where uh, it's it's like a 3 or a 7 point game through 3 quarters, and it's like they just screw up one possession and Michigan takes it and wins by 10. But I'm not going to be shocked if Michigan wins this one. They should, or if Indiana wins this one. They could be favored in this one, Tom.
They could be. I think Michigan's probably still going to go in there as a favorite because I think if Michigan goes in as an underdog, I think every person on earth is going to be betting Michigan. And I don't know if maybe the casinos want that. I'm not sure. Next up, Northwestern at Michigan State. That one, boy, that's going to have a Service Academy versus Service Academy kind of over under. That might be about a 29.5 point over under. Northwestern at Michigan. Uh, that's one where I'm going to definitely go with Michigan there.
Yeah, this is the one I feel most confident about Michigan winning. This is the one. This might be another 28-3 where there's no longer any doubt, so everybody kind of just packs it in. And yeah, this one will not be pleasing. And this is another one Michigan's going to want to get it done as quickly as possible, given what happens the next week.
Right. And the next week is they have to travel to Columbus to face the Buckeyes. I just saw an updated line. Buckeyes now favored by 19.5. That was about a 6.5 point line just maybe a week ago, or sorry, a month ago. I mean, that is a line where things have changed real dramatically, real quickly. And as much as Ryan Day wants to leave no doubt throughout much of the season, Tony, I have a feeling he would really, really love to leave no doubt against the Michigan Wolverines this year for, a variety of reasons.
A variety of reasons, but you don't think he'd feel bad about doing it to an understaffed, undermanned Michigan football program this year? You don't think he would maybe think about taking it easy on the Wolverines and just winning the surest way possible? He'd be okay with like a 7 point, 27-20 type of thing, and just packing it in for the fourth quarter and just running that clock.
I think Ryan Day might be willing to invite Mumford High School to come down as well and just play a doubleheader that day. That might be something Ryan Day would be open to, even with potentially a Big Ten championship game on deck.
I
Robert
don't know that
Howard
he'd.
Super Chat says, "Thanks for all you do."
Yeah, thank you, Robert. I don't know that he would. I don't know that you want Counter Stallions back on the anywhere near Ohio Stadium. So I would say no, Tom, no to that one. But thank you for that super chat, Robert.
Butch Jones says Michigan can't cry COVID this season. They have a beatdown coming, and it was funny. I saw that, and then I flipped back to the other tab where I was looking at the Michigan schedule, and just to the right of the Ohio State Michigan game on fbschedules.com, one of the most recent headlines is South Dakota at Portland State football game canceled due to whooping cough. So Tony, listen, you gotta adapt. You gotta survive in advance. Is someone going to get whooped that day? Well, depends on what you mean, I guess. Let's run through a couple. We have a bunch of questions. Good stuff in the chat. We appreciate you guys all throwing some good questions out there. And also we'll ask you to hit the thumbs up button if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not watching on YouTube, can you hop over to YouTube, to youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle, and hit the thumbs up button. That helps other folks find these shows, makes them financially viable for us to continue doing. And Tony, before we do get to the questions, should we let the people know? Let me just answer my own question. We should let the people know that if they are interested in supporting us and they want to, we appreciate the super chats. Another great way to support us is to become a member of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Right now, we are doing a flash sale there. Your first month, $4.99. So a great way. People always want to know, how will I know if will I like it? I don't know. Will I enjoy it? Is it worth the money? Great way to find out would be to become a member today. Just go to BuckeyeHuddle.com, click on subscribe today at the top of the page. Get your first month for $4.99, and that first month will include Marshall Week, Michigan State Week, Iowa Week, and yes, Oregon Week. We have a ton of stuff already planned for that Oregon game. Not that we're looking ahead, but plenty of stuff planned for that Oregon week, and have an extended trip out to the Pacific Northwest that week. So it should be a lot of fun, and you can get all of the insider access at BuckeyeHuddle.com by signing up today for that $4.99 for your first month deal. So check that out. Now, Tony, on to the questions. Geiger Lee says, please ask Ross Fulton to do a segment on what he would drop against Michigan for offense and defense if they played them next week. I actually am planning to have Ross on the morning show. We're going to record that on Monday. I've already talked to him to get his thoughts on some of the significant national teams, including Michigan. We're going to probably be talking Michigan, Oregon, and Georgia, I think, just to kind of get his thoughts on those teams. Where have they been better than he expected? Where have they been worse than they expected? Are there specific matchup stuff with Ohio State? So we may not do that exact show this week, but we're going to be talking Michigan with Ross on Buckeyes tomorrow morning, probably in about 24 hours. So you have that to look forward to. Here's another one from Geiger Lee. How many points for a bold prediction would you allow today for Ohio State winning by 50 against Michigan?
That's pretty good. I saw that earlier. I think this is a 3, but it's a 3, but it's not that far from a 2. Because we're talking bold. It's got to be bold. I would say, because when was the last time Ohio State beat Michigan by 50 points? I guess I could bring it up to see if it's ever even happened. But so if it's never happened, Tom, as we say, in the history of mankind, in terms of time itself, it has never happened, then it would have to be a 3-pointer. And I feel like 3 would be a good number there, Tom. Go ahead. You got something?
The largest margin of victory in Ohio State history against the Michigan Wolverines, Tony. Give me I'm going to tell you, I'll spot you this one. Michigan's largest margin of victory was 86 in 1902. Ohio State got a song out of that game, in fact. How about what is Ohio State's largest margin of victory against the Wolverines? And I will spot you this. It happened in 1935.
Didn't Ohio State wasn't it 42-7 in like 2008 or something like that? So
It was, yes.
okay. So you said 1900 and something or other, Dickety 2?
35.
Oh, so it was also 35. Oh, 1935
No,
was the year.
1935.
Okay. So I will say 36-0.
38 nothing in
Oh.
1935. They won by 36 points in 1968, 50-14. Won by 35 in 2008. Just kind of zipping through, looking at the other ones. They won 1934. They won 34 nothing. So back to back. Boy, 1934, 34 nothing. 1935, 38 nothing. 1936, 21 nothing. 1937, 21 nothing. 4 years in a row, shutouts over Michigan. That is, I don't know that I knew that. That's pretty remarkable.
Hire that guy.
All right, hire that guy. I don't think he's available. Don't ask why. Let's not ask any follow-up questions that would invite unpopular or unwelcoming answers. Brian Ritchie says, "I thought Michigan won by being tough. Can't they just get really tough?" This goes back to the Sherrone Moore smash thing. Like, that's great. That's great when you have a fantastic defense and a quarterback who at least presents the theoretical threat of the pass. Then you can just hit the smash button. And you can do that to a certain degree against the Arkansas States of the world. But we just went through the schedule, and I did not hear Arkansas State mentioned for a second game this season.
No, and this is something where Michigan fans are talking about. Yeah, before the season, even if they don't have JJ McCarthy to throw the ball, they've got Alex Orji. They can just run the ball, and he can throw it, obviously, because he's going to be the starter. So he's going to be good enough to throw it. Plus, they're just going to be able to run the ball with Donovan Edwards. They'll always create an offensive line. They'll always have something there. And you can't just run the ball. For one, you have to be able to run the ball. And then you also have to be able to do something else. Because even if you can just run the ball, it's a lot easier to stop if you can't do anything else, as we know. So, and as you saw in this game, where the Arkansas State safeties were like 7 yards off the line of scrimmage for some of these plays. They're just creeping up further and further and further. And now you've got 9 guys in the box basically, and you're running right into it. So that's the definition of tough. You want to know what tough is? Trying to run into that. And it's, as Tom said, they're not playing Arkansas State anymore this season.
Yes, Jordan B wanted to know if I was looking for at Winsipedia for that. Yes, that is my quick scan through. They give you the number one, the biggest win for each team in the series, but also they have kind of a bar graph, and you can scan through pretty quickly and get the biggest totals. Rusty Jesse says Tress could have named the score if he didn't feel sorry for Rich Rod in 2008 or whatever. Definitely true. They also had that was the game where they brought in Todd Beckman right at the end to throw a touchdown pass, which was like a really feel good moment because he had lost his job to Terrell Pryor, really not through any fault of his own other than not being as exciting as Terrell Pryor, which, there have been a lot of players in Ohio State history who have not been as exciting as Terrell Pryor. But Todd Beckman, was not Troy Smith. He was the guy between Troy Smith and Terrell Pryor, which are two pretty impressive guys to be surrounded by. But he got him to the national championship game in 2007.
I think the one thing you could say about Jim Tressel, he definitely dominated Michigan, but he only dominated them as far as he needed to. And whether that was 2001, just hanging on for dear life, and even the 2007 game that we always talk about, where Ohio State was up like 14-3, and they knew Chad Henne couldn't throw the ball, so it's like, we got enough points, we're good, we don't need to do anything further. The 2008 Michigan team, they were so bad that you definitely have to hold back on beating them more. Whereas Jim Tressel, who loved Pat Fitzgerald who loved Jim Tressel would just beat the ever-loving tar out of Pat Fitzgerald any chance he got. He would 58-3. Like, why is Jim Tressel and Jim Tressel team putting up 50-some points against somebody that he gets along with? And I never understood it, but Pat Fitzgerald was always just, thank you, sir. May have another.
I had a friend who was a Northwestern walk-on back in the 2000s, and he absolutely hated Jim Tressel. Hated Jim Tressel with a fiery passion. And it was like, well, I get it. I understand. I see what you're seeing vis-a-vis Ohio State and Northwestern in the Jim Tressel era. Here's one from Jordan B. Why can't Michigan just run the triple option? I feel that's the only way they get yards. That's why the Service Academy does it. It's the only way to get yards without a quarterback. You're not going to see the flex bone triple option. That requires a certain type of offensive lineman, and you can run variations of the triple options. Coastal Carolina, for the last several years, has basically run the triple option just out of the shotgun, so you don't look at it and think this is the same offense as the Service Academies. It's a variation on it, and I think that might be their best option at this point. If they don't have a guy who can throw it, at least have a quarterback who can run it and do something with Alex Orji, and you try and get creative. Because right now, unless they are really holding things back, and I don't think they are really holding things back, I don't think that's the main issue here. They're going to have to get a little bit creative and just sort of try and figure it out, because the status quo really not working. Here's one from Nate. Is Sherrone Moore in over his head? Each coach hire, I guess he's talking about, is questionable. Team does not have identity. Born on third base, anyone? For a program that loves to laugh at Ryan Day and being born on third base, Sherrone Moore number one, Jim Harbaugh is literally the son of a Division I head coach. So that gives you a little bit of a leg up in terms of he was an assistant under Bo Schembechler. Do you think that maybe helps you, get some connections at Michigan? Arguably, who's to say, Tony? Arguably, who's to say? But and then Sherrone Moore taking over a defending national championship team. So the third place thing was always a little bit weird to me when you consider Ryan Day's family background compared to Jim Harbaugh's family background. But also, Sherrone Moore taking over a program that was, had in the previous season had a much better season than Ryan Day's, the team that Ryan Day took over.
Well, and we knew that he was going to be left holding the bag on this one, and we've talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be the same team this year if Jim Harbaugh was the head coach. I think the receivers aren't going to get better because Jim Harbaugh is still here. This is the team that it was always going to be. So, I don't think Sherrone Moore is in over his head. I think he's just in a not a great situation right now, because what else is he supposed to do? Should they have gone into the portal for a quarterback? Yeah, they should have. I can't imagine they thought they were good enough there, and I don't know why they didn't, and why they felt they didn't need to. But every coach has questionable hires. Urban Meyer had questionable hires after he was long established at Ohio State. Billy Davis being one of those, and Nick Saban has had questionable hires. He's had some great hires. So I don't think you can blame somebody for hires in terms of judging them as a head coach. Now, in terms of the lack of identity, I think this is just who they are. This is their identity. It's like we're not very good on offense, and the defense can only do so much. I think this is if Sherrone Moore is born on third base, it feels to me like there's maybe some fan interference, and he's gonna have to return to first. You're gonna have to backtrack a little bit, because I don't see him being driven home at any point in the near future, because there's a lot of work to do. And I don't know that we're seeing the recruiting that we need to see in terms of making this a better situation. They were playing some guys on the defensive line this week that haven't getting really their first opportunity. Ike Iwana, and I know I'm pronouncing that last name wrong. He was playing today, or playing this week, defensive tackle. I'm like, I don't know who that guy is. Is this a transfer portal guy? He's a fourth year junior at Michigan, and this is the first time he's playing. So 3 years of not playing, and now he's out there in key moments. So that's not great. And great he made a play. He was the guy that flashed and made a tackle for loss into the backfield. It's like, wow, that's why he's like, who is that guy? Where did they get him? It's like, oh no, they've had him. He's just never been able to make the field. And so that's also a concern. So I think there's a lack of talent, clearly. And Sherrone Moore is doing what he can, but also, how much help did they have? We've seen him get plenty of help on the sidelines in the past as offensive coordinator, and there's nobody helping him now.
Oh, really? When? Next up from Billy Blanton, he says Michigan is cooked. I would assume Ohio State versus Oregon in the Big Ten championship. I think that's probably. I have not looked at the Vegas odds for that, but I would assume that would probably be the betting favorite. Those two teams, and Oregon. Oregon looked the first couple weeks looked pretty shaky for basically the entirety of their first 2.5 games, and then really hit the gas in the second half against Oregon State. They maybe have figured out some of the stuff in the trenches. Still some questions on the defensive line, I would say, there for them, but
Mhm.
that's probably. I think Ohio State versus Oregon in the Big Ten championship game is as good a guess as any right now. You could see Penn State get there. You could see Nebraska get there, maybe. And if Oregon loses a couple games or Ohio State loses a couple games, absolutely. But it probably would take one of those teams losing a couple games for that to not happen. Here's one from Geiger Lee. Davis Warren or Alex Orji will have negative 34 rushing yards against Ohio State. Is that bold? Yes, that is extremely bold. I mean,
Is it?
that feels like a three. Well, that feels like a 3-pointer to me. Negative 34 rushing yards
That's 3 sacks.
for it's 3 sacks. You got to figure Alex Orji is going to have. I don't think Davis Warren is starting that game, and I think Alex Orji is probably running the ball effectively enough that you're going to see him at least have some net positive rushing yards on non-sacks. And I don't know that he's dropping back often enough that you're going to have that many sacks.
So I would say I'd give you 1 or 2 points. Being the 34, we'd have to take it. So yes, I would have to take it. To answer a further question, earlier question, Michigan won 17-10 at Colorado. Just FYI. So that's who would win. I was
Oh,
asked earlier who would win. A great day of offense. 204 yards of total offense for Michigan. 143 total yards for Colorado. 5-minute quarters. All right. So
5-minute quarters though. So yeah, so hard to translate. But yeah, I mean, I think the path to Michigan winning games this year is a lot of 17-10 and 24-13 and a lot of that rather than something bigger than that. Geiger Lee prediction: October 27th, Michigan announces voluntary postseason ban. I think it's going to happen before then. October 27th would be the day after the Michigan State game, and boy, if they lose to Michigan State,
it's too
they
late.
might take a voluntary death penalty at that point. Yeah, I put something out there in the middle of the Texas game that I had set a Google News alert for self-imposed postseason ban, and I think they might have missed their window because if you do it after, if they get thumped by USC, like I think they could potentially get thumped by USC this weekend. At that point, like, come on, like everyone understands what you're doing. Everyone gets, okay, you've got 2 losses, you still have Oregon and Ohio State in the schedule. How much credit would you like for, voluntarily saying, oh yes, well, I have been caught red-handed. Please, here are my hands. You can put the cuffs on them now. That is not a general, genuine act of contrition. That is we can read our schedule just as well as you can. We know how this is going to go. I don't know how much that really moves the needle with the NCAA. Regardless of what moves the needle with the NCAA, here's one from Doug Shepard. What does Wink Martindale do in response? Blitz. I don't even know in response to what, but the answer is yes.
Yeah. Well, and as he has told people, he is the godfather of the Baltimore Ravens defense and everything that Michigan has done over the past 3 years. And you're seeing what happens when the godfather has to raise the child. They were never meant to actually do that. This is an emergency situation, and you're seeing what happens. Like, this guy was not prepared to raise this defense, but they're not as deep as they've been in the past because the depth pieces, a lot of these guys are now starting, and there's nobody behind them. And the guys that are playing, they still try to play a bunch of people as we've talked about, but they're not as good, and they're making mistakes, and they're getting attacked, and you're seeing some results. I mean, the defense did fine enough in this one, but they need to be not perfect, but they need to be very, very, very good each week and almost perfect in some weeks.
All right, here's a super chat from King Bronco. I'm finally hitting the panic button. It's sure over, I fear. Oh well. 42-27, 45-23, 30-24, 13-time national champs. Y'all can't take it from us. we're the best. Tony and I, not with the NCAA, we can't take anything from you. So that is all factually true. Can someone take it from you? We'll all find out together in a matter of a few months, probably.
I do know
Here,
that it's Sharover will be on a T-shirt by November.
I think that might be the you stole the Rich Man's Iowa from me a couple weeks ago for your Michigan Monday title for the column.
Mhm.
It's Sharover might be the might you might need a column title about a week from now, Tony, after the USC game,
Yeah.
and it's Sharover might be. Just make sure you give our friend King Bronco credit. Stupid Asshole says, I think Ohio State is the best college team based on what I watched this weekend. I mean, Ohio State didn't play this weekend, but you look at Georgia. I don't think there is an unbeatable team this year, and it's reasonable to think that Ohio State is the best team in the nation. It's reasonable to think that Georgia is the best team in the nation. I think it's reasonable to think that Texas is the best team in the nation. I don't think, based on what we've seen yet this year, that it's reasonable to say Oregon's the best team in the nation. But we're 3 games into the regular season, and if you told me that on November 10th, I would be saying, yeah, I think it's reasonable to think Oregon's the best team in the nation. Absolutely. I could absolutely see that happening. They're not there yet, but Georgia going to Kentucky is just, if you look at the series history, it's always a weird game. Tony and I did a breakdown before the Peach Bowl in 2022 where we watched, I think, 4 or 5 different Georgia games. We made a point to watch, hey, here's the Oregon game where they just take Oregon and just beat them with hammers for 3 hours. And then, but also watch a couple of the closer games. There was a Missouri game that year that was pretty close. The Kentucky game that year was pretty close, both on the road. And those, this was another game where it was very close for the entirety of the game. Georgia did not look very good, especially on offense. Kentucky's not a great team, but it was just a weird game and just a weird matchup. This is going to transition really neatly into Robert Howard's question. Unrelated, does Ohio claim Mark Stoops? Let me tell you, Robert, if you watched Mark Stoops' game management and how conservative he was and how many field goals he kicked at times that it was 4th and 1 or there's 9 seconds left in the half and you can absolutely take a shot at the end zone from 13 yards away, but you kick a field goal with 9 seconds left anyway. Mark Stoops, he has ties to the state of Iowa, Tony. I think Iowa's going to claim Mark Stoops after his game management last night.
Well, being a Youngstown guy, does Ohio claim Youngstown anymore? Youngstown's its own little. It's like the Vatican, it's its own little thing. Real quick on the best teams, don't be shocked when Ohio State drops again after this coming game and Tennessee jumps up for whooping up on Oklahoma in Norman this week, because Tennessee's been looking pretty decent and Oklahoma has not. So, we've just continued to see the rise of these SEC teams. They can only go up so much because they're already SEC teams ahead of them, but there is one Big Ten team ahead of them that they may jump here from for a while.
Henry DiCarlo says Ohio State and Texas are the best teams in the nation. I think they're absolutely in the conversation. Do not write off the Georgia Bulldogs. Just
No.
They had a bad game against Kentucky. Absolutely. You can look at we mentioned on the morning show that you'll hear a little bit later on Monday. It was raining a little bit. Sure. They had a bad game. Absolutely. They looked terrible. Yes. There are some concerns with the offense. It just was not, they don't really have great playmakers on the outside. I think that's going to be a little bit of a concern for them. The biggest concern for me, honestly, Tony, was the tackling, the defensive line. Just how many times did you see someone get an arm or a hand or 2 hands on a Kentucky ball carrier right at the line of scrimmage, behind the line of scrimmage, and then a 2-yard loss or a no gain turned into a 3-yard gain or a 5-yard gain or a 9-yard gain? That was, I think that will get sorted out before any time that Ohio State and Georgia are going to be facing each other. But that to me was like, oh boy, what Georgia did not look like Georgia on Saturday night.
Well, and every championship team has one of those games, so Ohio State has had their fair share in their championship years. I will say Texas with Arch. Yes. Texas with Quinn. That's old news. That's gross. That's no good. Arch Manning. He's the truth. Everybody knows it.
Yeah. And Troy V, I think, saying a lot of the stuff that we ended up saying a few seconds later, I haven't written off Georgia, but their offense is lacking. They miss Brock Bowers and they need wide receivers. Yep. And the problem is you can't bring those guys in right now. It is too late in the season. You've missed your transfer portal window. Rick S. Here's another suggestion. Rick S. says, I watched Oregon for the first time yesterday. That's a pretty good team right there. Their left tackles in NFL first rounder linebackers are good. And, Dylan Gabriel, I know the yards per attempt has not been great in a couple of games this year, but boy, he has just been, there's been a lot of 40 for 44 out of him this year, which if you're completing passes, if you're only 6 yards an attempt or 7 yards an attempt, but you're completing 90-something% of your passes, yeah, that might still work.
And the thing with their offense is the running game has been struggling, but they use their short passing and their RPO stuff as part of the running game. So even though it may show like 130 yards rushing on 35 attempts or whatever, the coaches themselves are going to consider all of the plays that could have been runs as well, and all of the RPOs or the screens. So that 135 yards or whatever is probably closer to like 260 when you factor in all of the other plays that go on. But still, when you need 2 yards on 3rd and 2, can you get it? And can you stop it? And those are the questions that will need to be banged out here eventually.
And TD Great River says Ole Miss and then says pretender ? And the answer is answer unclear, ask again later, like one of those magic 8 balls, because they've played the Furman Paladins and they won 76-0, and they played Middle Tennessee State and they won 52-3, and they played at Wake Forest, they won 40-6. They have Georgia Southern coming up this week. Then they have Kentucky, which does Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde show up for the Kentucky Wildcats in that game? Then they're at South Carolina, same question. Then they're at LSU, same question. Then they're off. Then they have Oklahoma, who might be secret booty cheeks. If Tony, I will be a little less circumspect than Tony. I think Oklahoma sucks, and the 15 next to their name is an absolute joke, and they're going to get firebombed by Tennessee next weekend. And then they're at Arkansas, and then Ole Miss plays Georgia in Oxford on November 9th, and then they play at Florida, and then they play Mississippi State. So they have really probably one good team on their schedule this year. So I think they'll probably lose to Georgia, and then they'll be 11-1. And there's a reason that you see Ole Miss as a 7 seed in just about every one of these bracket projections. It's because they're going to be 11-1 or 10-2, but they're not going to have any great wins. But they're going to be an SEC team that's 11-1 or 10-2. And Tony, it's the best conference in the
world. Well, I just want to see them not choke one away, win all of the games you're supposed to, and then win the one that you're not, which is the Georgia one. You're probably going to be favored in everything else. Why not win that Georgia game? It's at home. They're going to destroy Mississippi State in the rivalry game there. So there is a way that it's Ole Miss and Texas in the SEC championship game, or maybe Ole Miss and Georgia again if Georgia beats Texas in the SEC championship game. So I won't be shocked to see a 12-0 Ole Miss. It's a very favorable schedule for them, but they just need to be – I want to see them be consistent. I want to see Jackson Dart be consistent, and that's not something that we have seen yet, but this is probably also the best that they've been. So if they're going to do it, it would be this year.
All right. And since this is a Michigan Shin Monday show, we do need to get back to a few Michigan-centric questions here.
Yes.
Justin Courtney says, talking about Michigan, says they lost a lot, no doubt, but they also have 3 to 4 projected first rounders in the upcoming draft and like 5 or 6 projected to go in the first 2 rounds. And that's the thing about this Michigan team is there is still talent there. It's just the depth isn't there. And this gets back to what you've seen from Michigan teams over the years where they've had the star player or the 2-star players or whatever, but they don't have the depth across the roster that some of the national championship contender teams do. They did last year. They do not this year. That's where they're going to probably fall short and where they could get into some real trouble with just an injury or two to the wrong guy later on in the season.
Well, I mean, one of those injuries right now is to Colston Loveland, to one of those first rounders. Yep. So you look at him and he's been playing. Did it win a game against Texas? No. I mean, he's averaging like 9 or 10 yards a catch right now. And that's for your top playmaker. When your top playmaker is the tight end, you're already at a disadvantage. And when you have nothing else around him, it's even more like now you can shut down a tight end. You can keep him from hurting you and beating you basically and being the sole reason that you lose. But The other first rounders, Mason Graham started out the show saying he's been pretty quiet. Will Johnson gave up a bunch of catches, has been giving up catches and getting beat this season. So their first rounders are not playing like first rounders right now. So good luck with that. Like they need to get back to that. And until they do, like it's still, that's great. That's 3 or 4 first rounders. What else you got?
Yeah, this is very much a what else you got. And it feels like it's not that they don't have first or second rounders at wide receiver, but they got a bunch of mid round guys. I don't, how many of the Michigan wide receivers get drafted off of this current roster?
I would say at this point, I might go with one and just say Kendrick Bell because his brother did. And that's the only
Yeah,
reason. Like, I've
maybe.
seen nothing
Yeah,
from anybody to say that guy will get drafted.
right. And it's not
And I
like
would
they've
say
had
3 tight ends,
incredible what.
just
Yeah,
because.
they very well might have 3 tight ends, yeah. But, you go back to through the years, it's not like they've had the Marvin Harrisons or the Jackson Smith and Jigmas there, but Ronnie Bell or Roman Anthony, those
Mhm.
guys were really good, solid wide receivers where it's 3rd and 10, you can throw the ball to Ronnie Bell, and he will make a play for you, and he will pick up that first down. They don't have that guy this year, and they cannot bring that guy in the portal right now, and that is going to be a major concern. Jordan Kapler says, I've seen a lot of jokes online saying this is that Michigan offense I remember. Do you agree, or is this worse than their old average?
They, when we consider all of Jim Harbaugh's offenses at Michigan, there were some that were never great, but they could conceivably throw the ball downfield. And we were like, why don't you throw it more to Nico Collins? Just throw it up to him. Like they had receivers as well. This is as bad as I said, going back to 2008 when you have Stephen Threet and you have Nick Sheridan at quarterback and what was it, Fitzgerald Toussaint in 2009 as the running back or so. Like I'm just trying to draw back on all of the old Michigan Mondays from 2 decades ago now at this point. But even then they had some outside players and they've got, I like Kalel Mullings. He's fine. Where would he rank? He ranks behind Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum in terms of like recent guys. He's How many Big Ten teams would he be starting on? Like he's a former linebacker and he's had some good moments. He's their number one, but I don't know if is he a number one for a top 10 team? You know, he's a good running back, but he's limited. I think that's obvious. And he had I think like 2 or 3 30-yard runs in this game and was guys are bouncing off of him. But Arkansas State, how much stock you putting into that?
Yeah, and they came in with, I think we had the stat earlier in the show, something like 114th in the nation against the run coming in. So it's not that was not exactly a juggernaut. And here's 2 questions in a row that I think are very much related. So we'll hit them both. Doug Shepard Sr. says, "Do you think Michigan will tighten the rotation up since so many of the backups aren't ready?" And Troy V says, those boys on the defensive line look gassed in the first half. Those 3 and outs really exposes their lack of depth, and that's you have to rotate to a certain degree, and they have been very clearly trying to rotate, especially in the secondary. You've seen just they'll pull Will Johnson off for a drive and have the backups in there, but you've seen those backups get victimized. And yeah, it was in the closing minutes, but they gave up 2 passing touchdowns against Arkansas State. It just, yeah, you're going to be playing conservatively, and yeah, it's the backups, but there is not a Jermaine Matthews walking through that door as a backup for the Michigan Wolverines. I think you could make an argument, and I don't know, I don't know where I would have Will Johnson if you were going to combine the Ohio State team and the Michigan team. Will Johnson is certainly in the conversation to be the number 1 corner between those 2 teams. But I think 4 of the top 5 are on Ohio State's team. You've got Denzel Burke, you got David Snake-Benosin, you got Jordan Hancock, you got Jermaine Matthews. And then after that, we can have another conversation. But I think that it is a little bit of a stars and scrubs kind of roster for Michigan, where you've got the big name players, you've got the guys with the reputations that are going to, even if they have an okay season, they're probably still going to get voted first team All-Americans, because it's like, well, here's a name that I know, and here's a guy who I know he's good. I've heard about how great he is
Mhm.
for years, and he has been good. So Will Johnson is going to be a first team All-American this year, no matter what his season really looks like, assuming he's healthy. But beyond Will Johnson, there's just there's a lot of question marks there.
Yeah, and to the question, even you saw that against Texas when Texas would drive down and then it would get easier and easier to run as the drive went on. And at some point, they even took Mason Graham out of the game down in the red zone, which is crazy to me. But whether it was his turn or he was gassed, he had to come out. And it is interesting that the lack of offense from Michigan is only going to compound things. And you're seeing them try to build this depth and play guys now, but it's I don't think there are playmakers there either on the defensive line, either inside or outside, behind the known quantities of the four starters.
Yeah, and Doug Shepard says the defensive line has no depth and the starting ends aren't special, and I don't think that's wrong. The starting ends are fine, but there is not a Jack Sawyer in the defensive line room for Michigan this year in terms of the ends. They're fine, but there's not a future first round pick there. I would take both Ohio State's ends over both of Michigan's ends for sure.
Well, and Josiah Stewart is an undersized guy who has big games and big game potential, but he's like 6'1", 245 pounds, and Derek Moore, the other guy, is like 6'3", 255, 260. Like these are guys that can wear down as well because they're not very big in terms of bigger defensive ends, so they're going to wear down as well. And so that lessens then their potential for big games because they're getting worn down and being attacked, and they've tried to play guys behind them. They're not getting much out of those guys either.
All right, we've caught up on the questions. We got one more to end on here. This is a really good hypothetical from Geiger Lee, and I have an answer on this one, but I'm interested in yours. Do you think that an OSU non-quarterback will have more passing touchdowns this year than whomever Michigan starts against Ohio State?
In the game?
Well, yeah, I think this is it's a more interesting question if you take it as during the game, because whoever Michigan starts against Ohio State it's going to be one of three guys probably, unless something like cataclysmic happens in that quarterback room. So it's going to be Davis Warren, who already has a couple touchdown passes. It's going to be Alex Orji, who's already got a couple touchdown passes. It could be Jack Tuttle, who presumably would have started multiple games and have a couple touchdown passes. So it feels like this is a more interesting question during the game, and you're not getting more than one touchdown pass out of a non-quarterback. So really this is a question of, will Ohio State run a trick play, and also will Michigan be held without a touchdown passes in the game?
And I think you always have to assume Michigan is going to hit a big play against Ohio State because it always happens and has always happened. It's just the outliers are the 5 big plays. Like there's always one 40-yard catch and run or something, bootleg to a tight end that is streaking down the sideline or whatever, or a screen pass. Like I would expect at least one touchdown pass. I don't expect Michigan to throw the ball all over the field, but will be some broken plays, something schemed up really, really well, something you haven't shown all season because you're holding it for this one game and you lead into it. So I would say push at best, but I would take Michigan in this one.
All right. So, we are caught up on questions, so we can
wrap it up after 90 minutes. But I thank you guys for jumping on with us. Looks like the Browns are going to hold on. It's going to be great, everybody. No worries there. Do want to thank you for tuning in. Thumbs up before you go, if you could. We would appreciate that. And always, if you see us on Twitter, go ahead and jump over on YouTube. That helps us out as well. So thank you all for tuning in. Find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com, and we'll talk to you guys later.